Since I left corporate and I had a lot of my sort of former teammates or team members or colleagues or sort of asked me advice on certain things about their career and whatever, I always sort of say that question in terms of, well, what is it that you really want? And people will take a step back and go, and then they'll realise they don't really know. And that's not a criticism, it's because most people don't have the time to kind of think about that. They're just running the race day to day, get to the next promotion, and it's kind of like all very iterative. And that's great if you want to end up in that direction, but maybe you're running in that direction that's not the right one.
Welcome to the Roly Poly, the podcast about all things roller. Today's guest is Sam Turner, founder of Advantos, a platform buying HVAC and facility management businesses across the UK. This episode is a goldmine for operators. Sam's first acquisition was a disaster. Inflation spiked, the housing market collapsed, and the seller set up in competition the moment Sam paid him for the final installment. Then poached half his team. He talks about what went wrong and how he clawed it back, and why he changed his integration approach halfway through building the group. Let's get into it. Sam, thank you very much for joining us on the Roly Poly podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm really good, Dylan. Thanks for having me. So excited to get stuck into it.
So before we get into it, I wanted to ask you if you could tell us a little bit about your story. What were you doing before Advantos?
Yeah, sure. So I spent 23 years in a sort of corporate career. So I have a finance background, qualified as an accountant, but I spent most of my career in the travel industry. So the travel industry with TUI. Most people will know TUI as the kind of largest tour operator globally. And then moved as part of TUI. And we were about, when I joined, to give some context, and this is interesting in terms of my background and the experience I guess I've got, is we were doing about €750 million in sales. By the time we were sold to private equity, we were doing about 3 billion. So pretty big growth in that sort of 6-7 years. We were growing at a sort of CAGR 35% or something. So pretty substantial growth. And that's international expansion. So a lot of my experience was then growing internationally, opening new markets and stuff. And then we acquired our two largest competitors in that space, and we became a €7 billion organization. And then my towards the latter stages of that, what is now 14 years or so, I moved from the finance side to the commercial side to run the commercial functions for the business. I had about 2,000 people all over the world reporting through into me, so some responsibility, but some really great times there. But we spent the last year and a half of my time there integrating 3 businesses together, 3 commercial teams, 3 sets of contracts with hotels and with travel distributors, which was the business that we were in as a B2B a travel distributor. And that was a painful experience. And in the end, I decided to sort of get out of that, which I can happily sort of go into reasons why and what we're doing now. But that's my background, is more sort of most of my career in the sort of corporate space, sitting in the executive team, let's say the management team of a fairly large global travel business.
Wow, yeah, getting to 6 billion, that's quite the achievement. How involved were you on the integration side? Was it just on the commercial aspects, or did you lead the integration?
Yeah, so my role there was the sort of sales and sourcing, what we called sales and sourcing. So basically all of the commercially focused teams, of which there were many, like I say, up to 2,000 people in probably 80 plus countries in terms of where we were based all over the world, managing relationships with customers and suppliers. And a lot of those customers and suppliers were common to the 3 businesses. So when we were integrating, and my responsibility was to integrate the teams. So moving from 3 teams to 1 team. So we basically fully integrated systems and everything else. So I wasn't responsible for the technology side, although we had a big component of that was sat with me, as how technology interacted with our clients, especially through sort of connectivity and stuff like that. So part of it was technical and ensuring that was working for the clients. So it was the teams, but it was also then the commercial elements, like the contracts with hotels. Instead of 3 contracts, we would then move to 1 contract, making sure that we got the best out of the kind of 3 conditions. And likewise with customers, moving from 3 relationships with the same customer to 1, and maximizing that. So it was about integrating the teams, driving the synergies, I guess, that way, moving to a best practice playbook or operating model for the commercial functions, and then driving integration into our commercial partners. So it was a big role. It was a testing, I would say, sort of 18-month period. Then sort of stepped away from that into a more strategic role, looking at our growth strategy directly with our chairman. And then I decided midway into that I'd kind of had enough of the corporate life and decided to do something different.
Before we go into that, were these acquisitions the first one that TUI was doing? And then with your role, what would you say was the biggest challenge? Was it culture? Was it getting, everyone to agree on the best way to do things?
I don't know about the biggest challenge. I think I'd say a couple of things. So there is and this is I think relevant when we get into what I'm doing now as well, and what other people may be that coming from a more MBA type route or investment banking type route, and then moving to operating, what the kind of learnings are. So I think when it comes to these types of fairly large acquisitions, there's clearly a detailed exercise done around synergies, right? So actually what the synergies are and what the case is. Nobody pays attention to the dyssynergies in a deal, and it's always, for me, it's always like it's upside on upside on upside, and that's kind of not the reality of the situation. So I think there's a disconnect between the PowerPoint and the field, so to speak, and especially in our business where it was a fairly decentralized in terms of population of people. We're operating in lots of different markets. There's lots of different local nuances, and a few people at the centre assume that they understand all of that, and actually they can model all of this out without really getting the buy-in and input from people that needed to then deliver it. So I think learnings and challenge was PowerPoint's never the reality. It's easier in a PowerPoint than it is in reality. Secondly, don't ask people to do a job when they've not been involved in the design of the plan. I think that's a key challenge for me, and it was a key reason for me ended up leaving is, as part of me, I was accountable for a large chunk of the P&L, and yet I had no involvement in designing the plan of how this would kind of work from the outset. So then it's kind of very difficult because I've got these targets and I wasn't involved in those targets at all. So I kind of almost felt this inherent somewhat lack of ownership because I could have told you this wasn't going to work, kind of thing. So I think there's that challenge as well. And I think the third, which you don't really get so much in a small business context, is around the politics. And that's a fundamental reason for me to leave, is I really hate and despise, hate's a strong word, but I just don't deal well with the politics. And I think when you're bringing three organizations together, bear in mind the whole management team were in limbo for probably 6 to 8 months in terms of understanding who was going to get what role, and because we were literally putting three decent sized businesses together, and we wanted to create an executive team that actually had a combination of those three people, likewise underneath. So I think the uncertainty and the political manoeuvring that led to, we had McKinsey with the organization for about 2 years solid, their involvement as well as to what their agenda was versus what, there's too many agendas at play and too many people focusing on the politics as opposed to the actual sort of action on the field, and that's a challenge, I think, in business generally, but when it comes to integration, it's a massive challenge.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so you went from, so it sounds like you were a little bit fatigued from the corporate world and everything that was going on, and so you had a break. What happened in that time?
Yeah, that's a good word for it. Fatigued, I think that's probably maybe an understatement. Fatigued and frankly fed up with the crap.
Is it
I was
fair to
also
say that
traveling a lot.
you were burnt out at that stage?
I don't know whether I was burnt out, but because I'm not sure that I was. No, I'm not sure I was burnt out. I was just massively frustrated, because what I had was a lot of accountability, but not the autonomy to run with it. So I was kind of penned into not being able to make some critical decisions, and yet being accountable for the results of things that were not my decisions. That is a very stressful environment to be in. So, yeah, I was just incredibly frustrated and not enjoying it, and traveling a lot. We were living in Switzerland at the time, and I was on a plane sort of most weeks, and family kind of. My wife worked as well, so we were both sort of ships that pass in the night kind of thing. Two young kids growing up, so there's the combination of all those things, which is what kind of led me to the decision to leave. I managed to negotiate a really sort of a really good exit, let's say, with the company. I'm still on good terms with the company. They treated me very fairly through that process, and I managed to have 12 months in the garden, which was nice. We spent a lot of time kind of pondering and thinking around what it is that we wanted to do, and I think that just gave me the luxury of really being intentional about where I wanted to take my career and what my purpose was in life ultimately, and to kind of get that really, really clear, which I know a lot of people don't have the luxury of that. So it was fantastic to kind of have the luxury of that time. And through that time, I really sort of then gained clarity on what it is I wanted to do, which was ultimately sort of trying to leverage my strengths, what I enjoyed, spending time on what I enjoyed, and something where the combination of those two things plus the creation of value and some benefit to both me, but also the industry that I was going into was going to be available. So, if you like, the Venn diagram of those kind of three things led me to what I'm doing now.
How did you decide that, doing a roll up? I don't know if would you define Advantos as a roll up?
Do you know what? There's different definition there, and I was sort of, I don't bother myself so much with semantics. You got whole co, roll up, buy and build, the different things. I guess we're probably a hybrid of a hold co stroke roll up, because I'll get onto now in terms of what the model is, but yeah, let's say for simplistic terms, maybe a roll up where we're trying to buy businesses in the same industry and create some synergies of them working together and create multiple expansion as part of that. So yeah, you could argue it's that, and we'll get into the detail later. No, I suppose just to finish the question around how did I sort of get to that point. I read a lot. I consumed a lot of content around that helped me with the process of figuring it out, who I was, what I wanted to be, where I wanted to take myself and ultimately the kind of family with me in terms of what did that look like in the future, and sort of try to paint that picture and then sort of understand, how do I sort of get towards that, and so I worked through a fairly structured process, but by consuming a lot of intentional content that almost stimulated that thought process. And I think it was very clear that I came quickly to the conclusion that I didn't want to work for somebody else anymore. I wanted to be the master of my own destiny, probably because I was just fed up with being at somebody else's beck and call, and also, having this mismatch between accountability and the autonomy to make decisions. And that for me I just didn't sit well with me, and I didn't want to be in that position again. Working for myself, using my financial skills, which I would say I'm pretty good at the finance side. I'm pretty good at the kind of people and relationship sides. Working with something that I can navigate between the finance community. So I'm dealing with lenders, investors, etc. But I'm also dealing with small business owners and the management teams, and trying to kind of go between those two areas is something that I think I'm quite good at. I did that quite a lot as part of when I was responsible for the commercial teams. A lot of our customers were owner managed businesses and that sort of thing. So there was a process to get there, but ultimately it was about, I want to put a group of companies together. I want to use M&A as the main tool for that. I don't want to start something from scratch because I don't have the skills. I don't think to go from 0 to 1. That's not me, but I do have the skills to scale a business. So being intentional, looking at what I was good at and what I wanted to do, where I wanted to spend my time. I like to spend my time on external stakeholders, strategy, overall kind of setting the framework around performance, looking at numbers and data. I like that, as well as developing people. So the combination of those things is like putting it all together. Right, I want to build my own group. I want to do this, that, and the other.
Sounds like you did a lot of introspection during that period. When you say you consumed a lot of content, are we talking about a lot of content for you to find yourself and to realize who you are, or also a lot of content around how to build these strategies, reading maybe buy and build books and so on?
I'm not going to say it's got to be one book or this book or that process. If you can get to that point and be clear about that, I think that really helps you navigate through life, but also setting up obviously the next stage in your career and what decision you take.
Great. So you took a very pragmatic approach then to what is it that I want to do with my life? Where do I want to go? What are my goals? You probably spent a lot of time with your wife discussing this, and you made this plan of action. What was it that you built after that?
Yeah, so the idea was that we build something special, that we build a group of companies that can collaborate together. The thesis was, when we weren't industry specific at the time, so it was about just the concept of using it as a a vehicle to drive significant growth and also, wealth creation. But the wealth creation is for me, for more specific philanthropic reasons rather than actually from a sort of personal gain situation. But using A as a tool to grow quickly, working tirelessly to create an environment where people really enjoy being there, because we create the right environment from a people, from an engagement, from a motivation, from a growth opportunities perspective, that we do business the right way, that we're known for being good partners, not shady players, not, all the things that happen in business. So really sort of some of those things in creating value. But value doesn't necessarily mean financial profit. Value for me means you've created something that doesn't exist in its current form, let's say, which is a largish group that has got is fundamentally a great place to work in an industry now that maybe is not known to be that so much. And we've developed people, we've developed leaders, we've got a great motivated, talented leadership group. We've got it's a fun place to work. We've got high energy. All these things for me are valuable. And ultimately, you go, well, at some point, all of these things also create shareholder value, right? But it's more like focusing on these things, and hopefully the second thing will come. Whereas actually, if you just do it the other way around, you become almost mechanical about, oh, we need to then do this, do this, do this, and you kind of forget the importance of everything is about people at the end of the day.
Okay, that's really interesting. So you're not chasing shareholder value or to get the biggest amount of wealth. That's not your primary goal, but you just know that if you do what your primary goal is, if you focus on that, that's going to come anyway, the wealth, the shareholder return, everything around that. Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to sit here and say that that's not important, and that's not, one of the key reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing. To give you some sort of context is, what I want to do is create a lot of shareholder value, but in the medium to long term. It's not for me about everything is about short-term profits, and I think that's fundamentally what we're doing. We took first 3 years of what we're doing without getting paid anything, for example. Even now, we pay ourselves, my wife and I, way under market because we don't necessarily need to take more, because we want to make sure that the business is reinvesting as much as possible into the growth of the business, because it's about the long-term sort of creation of something valuable. So it's with a long-term mindset. And ultimately, yeah, we do want those big numbers at the end or along the way, because we want to do some good with that number as well. So it is about building that, but we recognize we've got a different lens to recognizing how you get there. I think that's the point. And how you get there is you've got to focus on some of these other ingredients, of which people is the biggest by in my opinion, along the way. I mean, yeah, we've made a lot of mistakes along the way. We're certainly not perfect, far from it, and we're learning all the time. But fundamentally, that's who we both are. And I talk about my wife as a partner in the business as well, and we're fundamentally the same when it comes to our focus on people and dynamics around people. And it's crazy to see, honestly, how many people are not focused that way. And I know we're all different, but you can also see the impact that has on maybe some of their teams when it's maybe not going so well. So I always say that when we talk about KPIs, probably the best KPI that really determines where your P&L trajectory is going to go in the medium term is probably the engagement of your people. And yet, actually, most people almost kind of disregard those kind of numbers. So we survey our teams every 6 months, and we get sort of engagement scores around certain things about a framework that we delivered, and we take it really seriously. And actually, what are we going to do to improve this, improve this, improve this? And the amount of people that probably don't take it that seriously because they think it's maybe soft is incredible, because they don't see the kind of link to actually the reason your P&L is not performing in 3-4 months time is because of what we've not done over here. So that's kind of just the ethos we have around it.
Yeah. Could you tell us more about what Advantos is and the journey so far?
Yeah, so the group is wanting to build, we have the vision to be the UK's favourite platform. We talk about platform, and I'll explain what that means for, let's say, hard services FM businesses, including sort of mechanical and electrical. And FM is facilities management, for those that don't know. So we talk about being the favorite platforms. A platform for us means there's an element of independence about what we do with companies. So company that joins the group, and we're largely acquisitive, so we look to acquire businesses, and they'll come onto the group or onto the platform. They'll retain the brand of the business, but they'll benefit from the technology that we've invested in. They'll benefit from the AI that is a heavy focus for us right now. They'll benefit from number of expertise that sit at the group level. They'll benefit from the ability to buy cheaper than they currently buy because of group deals. So there is that's what I refer to as the platform. So we're not plugging in and fully integrating businesses as one. We'll remain semi-independent. So we want to be so that's what I mean by platform, but we want to be the favorite platform, because there's others doing this as well, which I didn't learn about until sort of after starting the journey, but there are others doing this as well, probably more heavily PE backed than us. But favorite for us means favorite from different perspectives. So first and foremost, favorite from the team perspective. So it means that we are the industry choice or the employer of choice in our industry. And it comes down to what I was just saying, and we have a sort of framework of five pillars, like rewards and benefits, communication, recognition, teamwork, and growth. So that all of these kind of five things are the things that drive engagement, starting from the hygiene things at the bottom, which is about, your package and what we do there and whatever, through to basic communication, and which we see fundamentally as an issue in the industry generally, how to communicate to people, let them know where we are, where we're headed, feedback, all that kind of stuff. To recognition, actually patting people on the back, saying brilliant job with that, great stuff, go something on the company, or just little things. And we have the kind of formal things, and team member of the month and all that kind of stuff as well, but that's important as well. Then teamwork, how we collaborate across the group with each other, and how we foster this sense of team. And then lastly, growth, how we actually add greater skills, which we're developing like a training academy for as well, so people can choose what development that they need. That also benefits the company, that they can personally grow and develop as well. So it's these components for me that drive engagement. So a number of initiatives around those things, but that's effectively what we mean by favorite from a team member's perspective, favorite from a customer perspective, and the customer is because we want to be known for having the best people, and therefore they're providing the best response and speed of response. Speed, supported by technology is important. Best use of technology to drive value to customers in our space, which doesn't happen that much. It's not a very techie industry, and I come from an industry that's more tech enablers in the travel technology space rather than just the pure travel. And so that's favorite from a customer perspective is through the people, through the technology, and through the national coverage that we should have, because we're building national kind of coverage, and the speed of responses, those kind of four lenses. And then favorite from a community's perspective as well, which is something we've not really done very much in the coordinated way around. And I mean, social value in the community, that we want to be recognized as a great employer and a great company that adds back and gives back value to the communities. So that's something long term that we want to be known for. We're not doing a great deal apart from local initiatives at the moment, but we'll start to do more coordinated efforts around that. And if we get those three right, again, we'll be favorite from a shareholder perspective. So those kind of four lenses that we look through as to what we're trying to create as that. But like I say, it's in that kind of hard services, FM and sort of mechanical and electrical space, or technical services, whatever you want to call it. So properties, built environment, not in construction. We were in construction, that's another story, which we've then subsequently come out of. And there's some learnings in that from our first acquisition. But yeah, so all commercial customers, not residential or consumers. So that's the business, and that's what we're trying to create to be the UK's favourite platform in that space.
Okay, that sounds amazing. I'd love to hear about this first acquisition, but before we go into that one, you said that you want to be the favorite platform for the clients, for the customers, but you also said that you keep the brands decentralized. So in the client's perspective, how do they know that you are the platform?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that we think about a lot actually, and we've made some changes. So initially our thesis was, if we create this umbrella branding, and you've got different levels of integration when it comes to kind of branding, and different models suit different organizations and whatever. But we created the umbrella branding, so the brand was the same, and then we put part of Advantos Group underneath, so people could actually see that it was part of Advantos Group. Then we started to push the collaboration of businesses to work on the same contracts or the same projects together, which is great. It's what we want to do. So we've got an electrical company working with an HVAC specialist and maybe on the same contract, which is great. But the customer then gets confused, and they're like, we're turning up with the completely different uniforms, different bands, different branding, different invoicing, different kind of processes. And so we figured out that actually the better method here would be to have a more uniform logo and look and feel to the brand. So if you look at our brands now, the name remains the same, but the actual logo is all the kind of the same as the group logos. People naturally can see that actually that's part of the same group. We still also have part of Advantos Group, but it's more obvious that that's part of the same group now. And the argument is, well, we still have different specialisms within a group, but we're providing a more consistent set of processes, services, etc., just through different specialisms that we offer, rather than it's just one big thing that we can offer to everyone.
Yeah, I think that this is probably one of those big decisions that you have to make when you're doing a roll up is, what's the level of integration? How are you going to make them work together in terms of brand? Like you said, you can do it all the way from being extremely decentralized, where on the front end, you don't even know that it's part of a group, all the way to obviously absorbing that company and making it all one brand. And so you said that you changed your mind from the beginning, change the decision a bit on how to like unify the branding. Is there any other things that you sort of weren't going to unify at the beginning or centralize, and then you ended up doing so further along the line?
Yeah, and I think here's a valuable, I would say, piece of insight. I mean, it's my opinion, I would say, rather than a piece of insight that sounds more factual, but my opinion and my learning is part of the reason I felt I didn't want to integrate businesses. That wasn't going to be the model. I've been through a corporate integration, which was painful, but that was done for the right reasons, in my opinion. Even though it was painful, it was done for the right reasons, because we were offering the same services with the same value proposition. So the brands were almost competing with the same proposition in the market. Whereas here we offer slightly different services. Each of the brands offer slightly different services. So one might be specialist more on this versus this versus this. So it doesn't make sense. There's no kind of leverage behind a single brand from that perspective. But more importantly, I think, than that is, I felt one of the things around centralizing versus decentralizing in terms of the model is, I've previously favored a more decentralized approach. And in my former business, we went through this journey where we used to have P&Ls by country, with an MD by country rolling up into a regional MD, and they would then have autonomy of their P&L decision making in their P&Ls. We moved that to a purely functional approach. So we had one global sales, one global procurement, one global this, that, and the other. I felt like that was the wrong call, and I felt like we lost real accountability on the P&L, because then nobody owns the P&L, or one person does, the MD, and people own parts of it, but nobody's fighting for that P&L and feels like they've got the autonomy to make decisions within that, etc. And I felt like that was the wrong decision. Whether I'm right or not is another question, but that's a little bit my philosophy. Where you lose that accountability to make decisions, you also lose that fight to the P&L numbers, right? So I really, really didn't want to lose that in terms of the group. Having said that, I find that, how can I say this? A lot of these MDs sort of running the companies, that they're not as bothered as you think around those things, at least the size of companies that we're looking at. So maybe that isn't such a strong thing, because maybe they're actually only interested in the engineering side of the business, and they don't really want to manage the P&L anyway, for example. So it's not quite so much of an issue as I thought, or quite so much of a benefit as I thought. But the other thing that contributes to the decision for me to move slightly more centralized, is the fragility of a small business is quite high. The smaller the business, the higher the fragility. The fragility meaning, dependence on key people in the business or key contracts or whatever. And especially people, you get somebody leaving in a business, it's a drama. It's a drama. Honestly, it's like there's different levels of issues in different size companies, and I'm still getting used to these kind of dramas on a day-to-day basis because one person is leaving, and it just feels like a very kind of almost the potential to be very destabilizing for an organization, and therefore that's the other thing, and that's truer the smaller you go. And I think therefore there is a key. If I was buying businesses that were all 25 million plus revenue, I would probably say that's not a consideration, and you've got enough kind of scale and bandwidth and whatever to manage those big functions within that organization. If you're buying 5 million revenue businesses, you don't have that scale, and therefore you have got always that fragility. And I feel like that's another reason why what we've decided is the core of the business sits with the business P&L and brand remains. The MD is still responsible for the P&L, but we will operate a more hub and spoke model where a lot of services will get provided by the group to the businesses. So a lot of the finance, the support functions like our help desk in our support and all the administrative support, the quality, health and safety, marketing, even that there's no skill set locally for those businesses, even sales to a certain extent. I mean, we still have sales at each business level, but we also have a group sales director now that's layering on additional opportunities for those businesses. So it's really tried to kind of play to our strengths and actually get the model, the right one, still retain the accountability and P&L ownership, but take away the management headache of the fragility of those local businesses. And actually, once you've moved that into group wide, instead of having 5 people in each business doing these things, you've got maybe a team of 20 people that then the peaks and troughs are much easier to kind of manage. Your risk therefore is much lower. You can drive best practice across those people much greater. The speed at which you can execute changes is much greater. That's the other thing, is we've been trying to drive AI initiatives into the business, systems initiatives into the business, trying to then coordinate that across the businesses to all do the same. It's a nightmare. Whereas if you've got then one person that really buys into it, that can own the process of how we do some of those back end kind of processes, it's much quicker to get to market in terms of the value. So that's why we've ended up with you'd call a more of a hybrid or a hub and spoke, as we call it, model that we've sort of moved towards more recently.
Yeah, the thing with AI is so true. When you can have a sort of more centralized source of truth, it's amazing what AI can do. But if it's working from disparate files and data and stuff like that, you can't be as valuable. But this is super interesting. So you at the beginning you were concerned with the integration, having a higher level of integration, because there's a risk of loss of motivation and accountability and ownership and independence, which then is a risk of value loss, right, of that acquisition. But then what you noticed is by keeping it too decentralized which are the ones that you're acquiring, you're risking the destabilization when there's this higher risk of things going wrong, because someone could get sick, someone could quit, something could happen, and it just feels like it turns out it's safer when you centralize more. And I'm thinking as well, like the multiples that you get as an enterprise when they're slightly more integrated, it is higher value, right? Like there's a higher multiple.
It is, because what you've done is you've taken a lot of the hard work, you've done a lot of the heavy lifting, you've done a lot of the hard work, and also you've got something that is a little bit more scalable in terms of getting benefits. So now we've got the next acquisition that can come in. There's already a model that it can slot into, and actually there is a direct, there is a more clear synergy opportunity from day one. So I think from those perspectives, and you de-risk the business, I think, by having those more central platforms. For me, it's a balance, though. It's a balance between, and it's striking the right balance. And maybe everyone will have a different opinion on this. And I'm not saying I'm right and somebody else is wrong. And I do think it depends on size of business as to what makes sense in terms of level of integration. We wouldn't force something again immediately from day one as well. That's kind of quite destabilizing for the business. One of the things that's a big positive when you're talking to owners is your plans for the business is going to be not to integrate businesses is a big plus. Actually, we've been now sort of 3 years in the first acquisition 4 years, but most of the acquisitions are 3 years and 2 years in. I think we've built enough time to kind of go through that and actually then say, well, actually makes sense to now start to move into this direction. So I
Yeah.
think if we were to do it from day one, it's more painful. Although clearly now we have a clearer model, so we would be looking to expedite that if a new business came on board, because we've got a clearer model and we've got things more set up to cope with that. But yeah, it is a difficult one to wrestle with. But yes, the valuation opportunity is a little bit higher, and also perhaps the level of interest from potential acquirers it is maybe more interesting if it is a business that's a little bit more integrated rather than buying a bunch of companies.
Yeah, when it comes to the exit, that's something that, yeah. So what you're saying is, which I think makes a lot of sense, is, first couple of years just acquire, don't rush to integrating. And of course, this all depends on the thesis and the industry that you're going into and the size of businesses and so on. So there's not one size fits all. But what you feel like worked well for you was get to know these businesses, let them be decentralized at the beginning. And then when you can start seeing opportunities to what's the word, to unify a bit more, then do that, but wait a few years or wait a few acquisitions before you
Yeah,
start.
I think, I mean, we waited not because that was intentional from day one that we would do it later. I think we've kind of learning and now doing it. So I would say we probably wouldn't wait so long when a new business comes in now. We've got almost a kind of an integration playbook now written that says, month 1 and 2 we'd focus on this, month 3 and 4 would focus on that. Now, that will always flex a little bit depending on which is the circumstance of the business. I think, I think what we'd want to do is focus on where is the value biggest. It might be that you're bringing in a company that's got a great set of systems and processes. So why are we going to force to change that in the early stages? Why don't we focus on layering on more work and sales opportunities because they've already got the processes to handle it? So it has to be a little bit tailored
Flexible.
depending on the acquisition, but we would be a little bit quicker to kind of get these benefits. My view from day one has been a fairly long-term investment horizon in that we were looking at a kind of a 10-year plan really, and we're now sort of 4 years into that. So we've got 6 or 7 years remaining, and that's still my sort of my horizon, if you like, that I'm looking for. So it's still a fairly long-term play. It's not making short-term decisions to improve profit tomorrow. It's about actually improving the medium to long-term sustainability and quality of the business.
Yeah. How many acquisitions have you done already?
So we did 4. We did 1 initially, then 2 in the next year, and then 1. So we did 4 within 2 years, and we haven't done any for 2 years because we've been spending time on changing all the technology in all of those businesses. So there's a lot of time spent on the tech side, and we're now in the process of looking at bringing the next acquisition on board. So ideally, we would be looking at sort of 1 to 2 businesses a year, but that does depend on the financial backing. Let's say at the moment we haven't got like a big private equity investor behind us. We've got mine and my wife's own capital, plus a handful of, let's say, individual investors that are known, say friends and family, not really family, but certainly known individuals that are investors. Now, that could probably take us so far. Sooner or later, we're going to have to then think about who's the right partner to accelerate that growth. But 1 to 2 per year we can do without a massive backing. If we wanted to do 5 or 6, clearly that's a different would need a different setup for that.
Was that an intentional decision not to get any PE firms for now?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, 100%. Because I mean, everyone wants different things. I mean, having worked quite closely with the private equity in my former role, albeit at a vastly different scale, I understand what they're looking for. I understand the sort of playbook there. And I feel like I have enough knowledge it's not like I need a private equity playbook to come in and support with the growth of the business. It would be capital, yes, absolutely. But why would you then be giving away X% of the business when we're in the early stages of building that value. I mean, it kind of seems crazy. But it is finding the kind of right time to bring that in, and we're even considering maybe accelerating a little bit more now. And maybe it is a time to have maybe a smaller family office or something that has the right kind of supportive medium to long term patient capital view that can support us. But I would still want to retain the majority. So we've got control. We're in control. We know what we're doing, and that's important. The independence that this offers is attractive, right? So the flexibility and the independence is something that is a massive plus versus being in the corporate space, and I don't want to lose that too soon. So I think then, being a minority and a majority private equity owned, then you're working for somebody else and the whole game changes. Now, sooner or later that will probably happen, but now is probably not the time that I want to do that. I want to kind of build the company a little bit more.
Right, I see. Would you say it's challenging in the UK to finance these type of projects?
Yeah, I mean, financing is the key challenge in any deal. I mean, we've thankfully sort of always succeeded at managing to get the deals done that we've signed up to. But yeah, I mean, it's always a challenge. You've got to sell yourself. I mean, how I managed to get the first acquisition done, I don't know, because I had no experience in the space. It was actually a construction related business. It was relatively small. So how I got the funding for that, I don't know, but we did, and we've since refinanced to another partner. So the funder that backed us was absolutely fine, and they got the returns that they wanted, and so everyone's happy, even though that business didn't perform and hasn't performed, and for different reasons. Having actually the second and third that have performed better than the fourth, etc., then helps diversify that group, and that's why, for me, actually the learning is buying two or three as quickly as possible is actually probably a good thing because it diversifies. Having one, I mean, obviously getting the right one, it would be the best advice. So getting one good one is good, but you can never be certain, right? I was too hasty to get into the first one, and in reality, bought ultimately a poor business in an industry that took a battering immediately after we bought it, and therefore the two things combined was a difficult one to deal with. But we're now effectively out of that business.
Okay, yeah, you've mentioned that business twice now. I need to ask you, what went wrong, and if you could go back to talk to yourself right before you acquired, what advice would you give to yourself before starting Advantos?
So I think I was too quick to want to get the first deal done, and that's kind of a reflection on, don't get into the kind of deal heat situation. It's difficult once you've then started to invest your time and effort, and you see there's an opportunity to get one done. But that's what I did do. I was too eager to kind of get into that first one done. One of the good things. So this first business was sort of plumbing and heating installation business for new build residential properties, but on sort of large scale development. So it would be, we'd win a contract for 100 houses here and 100 houses there and that sort of thing. Yeah. Some of these contracts run for 2 years, 2.5 years, even 3 years, some shorter. What I liked about the business is it had sort of fairly predictable revenue, and it had these contracts in place, and I was coming in and already the next 12 months was pretty much certain from a revenue point of view. Okay, we needed to do the work, but it was fairly well set. What I failed to really understand was, and you could argue, well, it hadn't happened before, is what happens if the costs start to go up? Where are you there? Because you've got this contract with a fixed price with a customer. So, inflation had been pretty much zero for the last, or very small numbers for the last 10 years. And then literally after we bought the first business, inflation went from zero to 20, 30, 40% on materials. Materials are the biggest component of your cost base, even over and above the labour of what we were doing, because we were installing boilers, all the plumbing, etc., into houses. So, and this business was a relatively low margin business anyway. So the combination of that, and then actually the housing market, which was booming for many years, interest rates started going up. The consumer demand for housing went down. Developers therefore started to slow. Everything became more contractual and more commercially aggressive. there was like a perfect storm in reality. Having said that, and which we could never, let's say, predicted all of that. I think the learnings for us were, you know, be more diligent about the people in the business and the systems and the culture in the business. And it's not always easy, but behind what we bought, to be honest, was poor people in terms of management, very, I would say, weak management, no systems really in place. They had a finance system and everything else was Excel based. The finance system was old, and that was, which I didn't place a great emphasis on because I thought, well, I know systems, so we can implement systems. But it's a mindset. If people are not that way inclined, it's very difficult then to get them that way inclined. And a little bit the culture, and the culture was not very team orientated and that sort of thing. And that I should have been able to test. You're not going to know all of this because you're not going to get into the details of every company. You're not going to meet a lot of people. If you can, great, do it. But I would have done more diligence around that, look from different angles to understand that sort of thing. So I didn't meet. I met once or twice only with the seller because I was in Switzerland when we agreed terms living there, and we only actually met like 2 weeks before the deal was completing in person. Right, I was doing everything on calls, which was more difficult. I think in hindsight probably I didn't get. I wouldn't have trusted the same guy perhaps to do the right thing. I mean, bear in mind this guy set up in competition with us the minute we paid the last instalment on the business and started then taking a lot of the engineers, also the MD, etc. So, and that's what, some people find is acceptable. And for me, that's not the way to do business. But, if you're driven wholly by money, then that's what you do, right? And if you don't give a shit about anyone else, that's what you do. So you've got to learn actually that exists. So there's a bunch of learnings. Really, you need to have a good sense and a good relationship and a good sense of trusting the person you deal with, because if you don't find that, you'll find some issues later for sure. Do the diligence on the people and the systems and the culture in the business however you can, and that might be asking other people that might know the business, different ways of looking at that, and be a bit more focused around the risks of the business, not just the upside. So great that you've got long-term contracts. What's the biggest risk? You've got long-term contracts. In the case that actually costs go up, right? So you don't. And I didn't even give it a thought, to be honest, before that. And that's kind of crazy when you think that's the obvious risk is what happens when costs go up. Check the contracts. What do the contracts say? Does it enable you to pass that through? And in 90% of the cases, the answer was no. So, and developers in that space, they're not particularly supportive of subcontractors doing that work. Anyway, so there are some lessons to be learnt there. And I suppose the final one is we tried desperately to turn it round, turn it round, turn it round, turn it round. We spent a lot of management time and attention, and actually we didn't take the decision quickly enough just to exit that business. So what we did is we pivoted in the same company. We set up a new division focused on commercial M&E. We brought in good talent that my COO who we joined then put together a bit of a team. We grew this business, completely separate business inside the same entity. And what we've now done is wind this business right down. So all these contracts have run down, etc., and we've not grown. And therefore now we've got no business here, and we've got a business that's very healthy that's doing now. We'll do 6 or 7 million this year. So in 18 months, it's doing that kind of level organically. So that's kind of replaced and is now much more aligned with the rest of the group in terms of what we do. So we've got out of it, but it's been a painful experience because we got no value from that acquisition, and albeit it's been a vehicle to grow the business that is doing well now. So lots of learnings.
But that's a brutal start. I mean, everything that could have gone wrong sounded like it did go wrong. Great learnings. I think I really appreciate them, and I think the listeners definitely will. Just one thing came to me, like, I was trying to think of how could you have seen this coming? And then I got to thinking that actually you've gone into this space without having necessarily a lot of experience in M&E and construction into this space, right? I look at a lot of people setting up roll-ups and they tend to have a co-founder. And I know your wife is the co-founder in this case. I see like a split of skills. One is the finance side and knowing how to do M&A and deal structures and so on. And the other one tends to be sort of more domain expertise. Maybe it's someone that already owns a big HVAC company or whatever it might be. How important do you think it is? And do you think that that could have helped you avoid it, having that expertise on from the beginning?
Yeah. Short answer is yes. I did have some help, some friends of ours that were in the industry. They're in a particular niche in the industry, so it wasn't exactly the same. I think, it surprises me honestly because I'm a person that's quite typically quite strategic in and structured and logical. And what I didn't do is enough research around the industry and the kind of wider industry and understand where within that where within that sort of big, let's say M&E space, it makes sense. And actually, we're kind of narrowing that and refocusing that niche, or not niche, but focus area all the time. And I could have done that much easier. I think so that's disappointing. So just doing the a lot more research on the industry, talking to people, understanding, etc., would have been probably enough for me to not have chosen that business. So that's on me. I think having industry and domain experience is massively helpful. What changed for us was when we got our COO at a group level, because we have MDs running each of the businesses, and then we've got at a group level, we've built out, pretty impressive now group structure with not just myself and my wife, but a CFO who's ex PwC, very, very good, very talented guy who's very systems driven as well. A COO who has got an ex kind of large company background, but he's young, hungry, but he's built a team from zero in his former company, from zero to 50 engineers, 20 million in revenue. And that's why he's been able to kind of do something similar. So when we got that COO, and we've got a sales director now, and we've got an MD for our FM side of the business. So we've got now a built out group function as well. But that first hire, that was the domain expert, apart from the MDs that we've got in the business, somebody to really kind of partner with me on the business, was game changing. And all of a sudden you have access to people, you have access to talent, you have access to knowledge that you didn't have before. So yeah, I mean, that was for me was that with the changing point on the trajectory of where the business could kind of get to. If you have that from the start and you have somebody that's really hot in that space, knows the space very well, yeah, I would say that is a massive, massive advantage. But I could have avoided lots of the pain by being a bit more diligent around the industry research that I did. And to be honest, not being looking back, so kind of probably naive about it, and that speaks to the point around being very eager to get the first deal done.
Yeah.
And it's been definitely painful.
By the way, I love how open you're being about failures and mistakes that you've made. I think like the way to learn, everyone knows that you learn from your failures, but actually voicing them and letting other people learn from them as well is amazing. So thank you for that. So I have a question.
Just on that, Dylan, I think it's not been an easy journey. I mean, I think the what we're building is really incredible and really interesting, and will be extremely valuable, and for the different reasons I outlined. It's been painful to kind of go through some of that, in the not more recently, but in the earlier days when the one business is really kind of not performing, and then the impact on cash, having to maybe put a bit more money in to start with, and all of the headaches around, have we got enough cash to pay the payroll, all of that kind of stuff is very acutely. All of a sudden you're in this. I was doing this successful corporate job where I got paid a lot of money, nice lifestyle and whatever, to now working in this small business context with things going wrong and your own money at stake. So it's been a difficult journey. And for sure, I'm not not the best at this, but people talk about resilience as the kind of key ingredient in entrepreneurship and in business, and I can't disagree with that. And there's been a few times where, probably if it wasn't for my wife mostly, but also some others really kind of supporting me, I was kind of, really down. But you've got to have that mentality ultimately, that is just, you've got to keep going, put one foot in front of the other. The better times will come, and eventually they do, and hopefully things end up. We had some very poor luck, I would say, on different components. Some of the stuff you go, you couldn't write this, but yeah, so that resilience piece, and you got to be open. You're coming into it. It's not a bed of roses. Maybe you'll be less unlucky than I was on the start. But yeah, be ready for tough times, and have a think about how you'll get through tough times when they come, because they will.
Yeah. I think it's remarkable that you were able to, you sort of sorted out the funding yourself. You didn't go to sort of a big investor and get mega diluted. Then had such a bad experience with the first acquisition and still managed to pull through that. And I think it's almost quite ironic that you said before, your skills aren't in starting a company from scratch, but it sounded like you kind of had to do that just to get out of that situation, which there's a bit of irony there. But it sounded like you're pretty good at it, actually, from the sounds of it. You did a good job turning that around.
I'll give credit to all the credit to our COO for that, because he was instrumental in convincing me to diversify that business, in picking the person to kind of lead that business, in getting the first few engineers in the door, to driving and making working hours possible. All I did was have faith in him and believe in his concept and back him. And so I can't take credit for the work involved in putting that together. And that comes down to my point around everything's about people. If you have the right people around you, you'll succeed. If you don't, you won't succeed. And it's as simple as that. And I think my job is as much around making sure that we've got great people in key leadership positions, making sure that they all know and are aligned around what we're trying to do and where we're trying to head, and making sure people are incentivized to kind of get there as well. And that's a big chunk of what we should do. And I think even the MDs, and I see this across businesses I speak to, they don't know how much of a component the people component is and should be for them. They'll fill their agenda up with other things, but actually, if you've not got orchestrating your key people, driving things and aligning things to where you want to go, you won't succeed. You'll just be a busy fool running around fighting fires. So, but if you manage that and get the right people in, and I think people are reluctant to also get the right people in because they've worked with someone for 10 years, and maybe that person isn't the right person to double the size of the business, but they're too late and we're all too late, I think, to recognize that and do something about it. And the people that are brave enough to spot it and be intentional about, look, we need more skills here, and go and get that, I think will be the ones that climb and grow more successfully.
This is my last question, and it's exactly related to what we're talking about now. How is it that you find good MDs? Do you usually promote people within the company, or do you have a process to recruit those MDs?
So we've had more experience of building the group functions, I would say, me directly in that. We've changed a couple of the MDs, but I would say generally around finding talent is working with somebody that you trust to find that talent. So luckily, one of the advisors on our board owns a recruitment business, and therefore he found our CFO and he found our COO as well. So it's working with good people to kind of help you support that kind of search process. Now we rely a lot on people that are known to us. So again, a good source of talent comes from our COO or others that know good people that might be interested, that put us in touch and whatever. But once we're in touch with somebody, and I was having this conversation with a friend of mine who owns a business in a similar space, and he's looking for a key ops director, stroke MD to be the business, and he's the owner. He wants to kind of step away over time. You got to sell the vision as well. People, in our case, it's maybe easier now because we've got a group, we've got a brand, we've got something that we're trying to put out there. But initially, to my COO at the time, you've got to sell where you're going, what's important to you, why, what are we trying to create here, and why. People need to be sort of compelled on that, and I think people need to think about that as part of the recruitment process. It's not just about what you want; it's about demonstrating that you're really attracting people to your organization and not selling the dream, because it's not a dream, it's selling the vision on what you're trying to create. I think that's really important. Then I think the other things are, get plenty of eyes on the candidate. So we recently hired, we haven't announced it yet, but well, two people. One, the sales director who joined 3 weeks ago, who I think is going to be an excellent hire, and another a guy that's going to run the FM arm of the business, which is two of the four companies basically. And what we did is so I've met them 2 or 3 times. We got every one of our exec team, so the other kind of four guys to meet with them and to interview them to kind of discuss, which is only fair on them as well, because they're going to be working with these guys, so they need to feel like, does that chemistry exist? Are we aligned around the same things? Are the values the same? What skill sets do they bring? Are they going to be aligned with the skill shortages that we've got, etc.? I had two of my board advisors also meet with these people. So I had a real viewpoint from different angles. We then also did we use a tool to do like the profiling of sort of energy preferences and where people are best suited and what tasks they prefer to do and this sort of thing, to see, does that match with the role that we're asking them to do? So classic example, in my CFO, and he knows I always say this story. I had two candidates that were both good but very different. One was probably a bit more like me and was more in the sort of creative, visionary kind of space, which as a finance guy is not normal. And therefore I was probably more likely to go with him, but just because we got on better and maybe it was more natural and whatever. And the other guy that was a bit more, I would say, more typical CFO like or accountant like. And I was going to go with the other guy, and then the guy that was supporting me and challenging me on this process, saying, "But that just doesn't make any sense. Look at the profiling here. We did the profiling, and it was very, very clear that no, this is the perfect guy for me, because actually it complements exactly what I wanted." And that's been has been a fantastic hire. So having that profiling tool, making sure the energies match the type of task and the type of things that you're going to be wanting that guy to kind of own, is important. So I suppose what that tells you is a fairly thorough process, and a process that involves a bit of data gathering, profiling, as well as getting a proper 360 view and different angles and different lenses, but being clear on what you want from that role as well in the first place. So I think there's a combination of those things, but it's just, again, be intentional about that hire. But I would say what I see people failing on when I sit in interviews, or have done in the past, is selling it. Even an engineer coming on board, I say even an engineer, it's the lifeblood of our business, the core of our business. We don't sell it, and yet we're trying to create the best environment in this space. Why is it the best environment? Why you want to join here? It's not just about, right, we offer you this much money, this much holidays and whatever, which is important to engineers, by the way. But what else is important? The way we basically communicate is this way. What we do is like to get the teams together every da-da-da. What we're trying to create is this, and this is the direction we're going, and it's going to be great because you're going to be able to grow into different roles. We've got different group companies. We can know all of this is brilliant, but we don't talk about it. And that's the bit that we're certainly not perfect, but you have to sell yourself as well to the candidate, and that's the bit that I see people failing on quite a lot.
This is all fantastic advice. Thank you so much for sharing. And the whole episode has been amazing. We're well over time, so thank you so much for staying on. And I know you're a busy guy, so really appreciate it. But one question I'm asking every guest is, who else should we have on this podcast? Who's doing interesting things in the roll-up or acquisition space that would be worth speaking to?
Can I think about it and come back to you on that one?
Yeah, you can do that.
I'm not going to think of a name off the top of my head, but yeah, I will come back to you on that one.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. And thank you for being on the episode.
No, pleasure. Thank you.